All right, I've been having a ton of fun with this Bossk ECL deck, and I wanted to share. So this deck can pump out insane amounts of damage, and it's just super fun to play. I think it is actually kind of strong, and yeah, let's just dive into it. There's one card that I think really makes this deck fun and really able to do some crazy things, and that card is Dogfight. So Dogfight is from Jump to Lightspeed. Just cost 1, attack with a unit, even if it's exhausted. That unit can't attack bases for this attack, but you know what? That's okay because we're going to make this work anyway. Let me just get into the deck list right here. So here's what we're working with, and I'll explain why Dogfight is so cool after this. So if you're looking at this deck, it's basically a set 2 deck just with Dogfight added. And I played this deck a ton in set 2. It's a deck I brought to Gen Con, a very similar version to this where you're trying to reset Toro, you're trying to ECL Madi, do crazy things like that. If you know me, you know that's what I like to do in this game. So this whole deck is basically built around being able to attack multiple times with your units in a round. And I don't know, to me that's just super fun. And like the damage ceilings are absolutely crazy. There are games that you win turn 5 and you've dealt like 40 damage in the game. It's wild. So not only do you get the reset stuff, but you also have some heavy hitters like Kylo Ren, Ruthless Raider, Maul, things that are going to be able to hopefully close the game out for you when that time comes. So let's talk about a couple things. The turn 1 can be a little bit dicey depending on the draw. We've got Kylo's Tie, we've got Mercenary Gunship, and those are like really the only like 2 drops that you want to play. You also have Dengar, so that's like kind of the other one. So it's like Kylo's Tie, Mercenary Gunship, and Dengar alongside a bounty. If you draw Dengar and you don't draw bounties, it feels kind of bad. And if you only draw bounties and not Dengar, that also can kind of feel bad, but it's not the end of the world because at least you can start chipping away at your opponent's units, start getting value out of those bounties. Bounty Hunter's Quarry is a crazy card still, and I think that does a lot in terms of making up for the downside of going first with either only, Dengar and nothing else, or like just Bounty Hunter's Quarry as your turn 1 play. So I would say that like the turn 1 is a little meh, but turn 2, it gets a little bit more exciting. We've got Toro and Punishing One. Both of them can reset, and that is definitely fun. That's definitely what we want to be doing with this. And then you kind of go off the races from there. So I'll explain more as we go through this sort of deck guide. But those are the things that we want to know. Early game, like you're looking for either Tie Silencer, Mercenary Gunship. You're really just trying to get damage in with those, not trying to do too much else. This is an aggro deck, so your goal is to kill your opponent. There are some games where, we'll talk about later, some of the bad matchups where, maybe that's not your role. But I mean, this deck can race aggro decks if you get the right draw. So let's just move forward, talk about why Dogfight is so cool, and then we can get back to some of the other stuff. So Dogfight is especially good. You guys may have seen this with Maul already, where you can ambush Maul in, overwhelm, and then use Dogfight to attack again. And that's a huge damage spike. But because we're playing Bossk and because we're playing bounties, we get basically 2 more Mauls. We get Jango Fett and Trandoshan Hunters. So that very powerful effect of being able to overwhelm through your opponent's unit and then do it again, overwhelm through another unit, pretty crazy. And we're running ECL, so we can turn those into Maul by giving them ambush and then using Dogfight. And it's cheaper and it's awesome. It's a lot of fun. Like there are some flip turns where you flip Bossk and you have a bounty on already, or you put on the 0 cost bounty and then you can ambush Jango in to something and then Dogfight to attack something else. Maybe there's multiple bounties and you're able to get a rich reward and get 4 experience spread around your units. It's just a lot of fun and pretty strong. The other units that work well with Dogfight, I guess just one unit, Kylo. I think Kylo is so fun. I love this card. Very strong with stuff like this where, the on attack ability is giving you extra power, and being able to use the on attack again to give something more power is even better. So that's why Armed to the Teeth is another card I'm showing here, because that is basically doing the same thing. And, if you have Toro with Arm to the Teeth, and you can basically attack with Toro 3 times in a round between his normal attack, his reset with, playing a bounty hunter, and then dogfight, you're giving another unit +6 attack on top of that. So can be very strong. And then the last thing is just, if you've spent your ECL, or if you just have a Mahdi in your hand and you can't figure out what to do with him, you can play him and then dogfight with him to just, kill him, ready one of your other guys. And that's just super fun. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it feels great. Okay. So yeah, basically this deck is centered around resets and buffs. And so, yeah, just lots of fun. We've got ECL Mahdi as an option. You can play Mahdi on his own and then hope that your opponent doesn't interact with him in a way that's bad for you. But just the fact that they can't interact with him if you ambush it means that, if you've got Arm to the Teeth on Toro or Bossk or something else big, you can get another good reset out of those things. Toro, punishing one, they naturally reset. And so giving them extra power is extra good because that power is multiplied across all the different attacks that they're getting. So for the buffs, we've got Rich Reward, Arm to the Teeth, Kylo Ren. Kylo's a little bit later in the game, but I've had plenty of games where, you put a Rich Reward on early, you flip Bossk, you get a bunch of experience, and then you get to do a bunch of resets, deal a ton of damage. And the cards are pretty cheap, so you can potentially do multiple of these things at once and go really crazy. I'm going to show an example of a turn that actually happened in one of my games that you guys can look forward to as something that can happen if you play this deck. So, and then another buff being dogfight. If you dogfight with Kylo or something with Arm to the Teeth, that's another buff, as we talked about before. So here's a crazy example of something that can happen. So let's say you've got this, you're on turn 4, you just flipped Bossk, you've got Toro on the board, Django on the board, who readied Toro last turn, so they've got at least 3 damage on their base, and then they play a unit. And then you can Rich Reward on their unit, attack it with Django, maybe deal some overwhelm damage, maybe not, but you're getting 2 experience each on Toro and Bossk. Then, you only spent 1 resource, now you're spending 2 more on Arm to the Teeth. You're going to attack with Toro, deal 7 damage because he had 2 experience and the buff from Arm to the Teeth. And you're going to buff your Bossk, putting him to 8 attack. And then you're going to ready him by playing Dengar or the Bounty Guild, whatever. And then you're going to do it again, give him 2 more attack. Bossk is going to deal 10, and you've dealt now 24 plus damage on turn 4. That plus is, in case Django actually dealt overwhelm damage. But this has actually happened in a game that I've played. It's so fun. It's so crazy. It's so much damage that your opponent just does not see coming. And I love it. It's definitely my favorite kind of deck in this game. So I want to talk a little bit about decks that really suck to play against if you're playing this. One is Kaz, and recent meta shakeup with the ban of Django, TDR, DJ means that aggro is back on the menu, and if Kaz becomes the aggro deck of choice, this strategy is very sad for you because his ability turns off all bounties, and even if he turns it off earlier in the game, you can't play a bounty on the unit because it can't gain abilities, which I think is silly, but that's just how it works. So Kaz just basically nullifies all of your bounties, which is kind of the whole point of playing Bossk. So if Kaz becomes super popular, this deck's probably not the deck that you want to play. The other deck that can be rough to play against is something like Bossk Blue, where they're really not playing a lot of units. And so in those scenarios, it can be hard to trigger your bounties, hard to get value out of, Django Fett and Trandoshan Hunters and things like that actually want you to have bounties on your opponent's units in order to gain value. Even Punishing One and Dengar, all those cards get a little bit worse if you're playing against an opponent who doesn't play units. You still have other plays to make, but it's definitely not as good as it would be if your opponent's actually, playing stuff to the board that you can then use your ability on. So super fun deck. I love it. I think it's so fun. I want to talk about some cards that you could consider including in this, and then we can take a look at the deck list one more time, see if I missed anything. But yeah, so Disabling Fang Fighter, great at removing upgrades and still being a thing that you can attack with, which is what this deck wants to do. So maybe if Kaz becomes really popular, that's a card that you want to put in because, you know, maybe your punishing ones aren't as good, or maybe there's some other cards that you don't want to play, or you can swap out some bounties for this even, and you can remove their Kaz, you can remove the Han that they're going to play out of the unit, all that. Stone Landspeeder is for that other matchups, for the scenario where your opponent's not actually playing units. You can give them a unit. It has a bounty naturally, so you can just, you know, ping it turn 1 if you get draw turn 1, which hopefully you would, and then, you know, you get some value that way. Open Fire, just decent removal. There are, you know, not that many removal cards in this deck because the deck list feels kind of tight, but dealing 4 damage to a unit, if people are just playing Falcons and stuff like that, maybe that's just what you need to do in those matchups. Legal Authority and Take Captive, I have messed around with, and I played with Take Captive in the deck early on when I built this in set 2. And there's like scenarios that it can get you out of that you wouldn't otherwise be able to because of the colors that you're playing. So it's not super easy to deal with like big Sentinels or Sentinels with shields. And both of these are like pretty cheap ways to do that. So if your opponent drops like a Village Protector, like Legal Authority is a pretty good answer to that. And same with Take Captive. Take Captive is a little bit more restrictive because it has to be in the same arena. Legal Authority, I think the unit has to have more power, but in the scenarios where you're playing it, it's, you know, they played their Bright Hope or they played their Village Protector, and like, you know, you're going to have something with 3 power that can steal those. So might want to consider putting those in the deck if you're seeing a lot of that stuff. Traitorous, I think, is just like a pretty good card in this sort of, you know, shaping up meta right now with people putting Han on their Falcons and stuff like that. Being able to steal it, super nice. I like it in a version of Bossk or a version of like Green Villain where you're playing Super Laser Tech and Resupply, so you can like, you know, play this on turn 3 instead of turn 4. It's definitely less exciting on turn 4, but maybe it's worth trying. Imperial Interceptor, just like another anti-space card. You can ECL it in and deal 6 damage to a space unit, which, you know, sometimes you need to do if they've, you know, put their giant pilot on there. Like, there's not a lot of answers in this deck to big space stuff naturally, so that's, you know, potentially an option. And then Top Target is sort of on the maybe list because, you know, it's mostly a card that you want in here against aggro. Like, you're willing to pay the aspect penalty to play it against Sabine probably, but not Kaz, because Kaz just turns it off. So this is definitely a maybe because there's a chance that it just straight up is a dead card in the matchup that is meant for. So those are some cards that I wanted to talk about that could go in this deck. I didn't talk about the sideboard, so let me go back to that. The sideboard could use a little bit more thought, I think, but the general idea was like Cham is, you know, great into Han or other ramp decks, and it's been really good in those matchups, especially because Bossk flips on 5 resources. So, you know, you play Cham and then you can immediately flip Bossk at that turn, especially, you know, they're playing Han, they're often ramping on that turn if you're playing against you know, another green villain deck that's ramping like Piet or something like that. Really great into that. Then IG-11, just a good ECL target against aggro, but again, if like space aggro becomes the thing, then this is not what you want in that slot. And we got another Ruthless Raider, just a good card against control. Can help you finish out the games. It's just an annoying ship for them to deal with, and having another one is really nice. And then 3 Palpatines specifically for Snoke. And when I played this in set 2, like that was one of the big, you know, cards that shut this deck down hard was Snoke, and like you need to have an answer to it. So in this deck, we actually have 5 across Palpatine and Kylo. If you don't burn your ECL early, or if you could do like Kylo plus Dogfight, you can kill Snoke with that. And yeah, so that is something that I feel the deck needs. And Palpatine also has Overwhelm, so, you know, works with Dogfight if you need to in that way. So yeah, that's it. This is the deck. I think it's super fun. I think you guys should all try it out. Can burst absolutely insane amounts of damage, and it's just so fun to play. Hopefully you guys can tell that I'm excited about it. So if you guys have any thoughts about how I can improve this deck, or changes that you'd make, let me know. So over the next couple of gameplay videos on our channel, I'm actually going to play this deck. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.